All right, I'm here with Andy from DIMO. Super psyched to have you on the show. Welcome, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yep, hell yeah. I should probably make sure you are Andy before I start. We didn't establish that. You've been who I think I've been talking to on Twitter, but
Yeah,
you never
that's
know.
me. I am the one typically behind the DIMO Twitter, and I think everybody is excited at least on our side, is excited for the day when that no longer is the case. But for now, typically it's either me or Alex from our team. And yeah, ever since we launched the project about a month and a half ago to the public, we've been trying to keep it pretty authentic, and so you get it straight from the horse's mouth when you're on Twitter looking at DIMO.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it brings up the first kind of point, or the first issue with these blockchain and Meatspace project is there's always some person behind these, right? With the rest of kind of cryptocurrency blockchain, you never know if you're talking to someone totally anonymous or if they're going to rug you or what. But here we are talking to you. You've got a team behind you. We're just in the other room with you with your computer, kind of watching them.
Yeah,
and it's cool to see that there's a bunch of humans behind a project and it's an actual thing. So cool.
Yeah, we're definitely real people in the real world doing real things, and that was always kind of one of the things. I've been a longtime observer of the space and had the same inclination that you did, which is a lot of these projects are kind of shadowy and for good reason, with some of them operating in kind of a regulatory gray space, or working on things maybe while they have a day job. And I saw seeing Helium and interacting with some of the people from the community was really one of the first points when myself and some of the other people on the core team and the founding team of DIMO were like, it's time to go do this thing for real. It's matured to the point where it feels like something that you can jump in on and spend every waking moment of your day working on, and it's cool to see so many other people who are taking the same approach.
Dig it. Well, let's talk about what DIMO actually is, because some people might be like, well, what is this physical thing you're talking about?
Yeah, so the way we describe it to people is a user-owned IoT platform starting with connected vehicles. We have developed both software and a hardware device with one of our partners, 𝗚𝗿𝗶𝘀𝗁, that allows you to connect your car to the internet. We have really learned quite a bit from the Helium project. We've been participants. We've built Helium networks and have adopted a lot of the same kind of building blocks as far as how we create device identity. There's some really nice things about the connected vehicle space that allows us to essentially enforce unique identities for vehicles. Every car already has a VIN number. A lot of modern cars already have internet connections, and we as folks who are in the connected vehicle space understood a lot of the problems with centralization in that world. And we think that the kind of Web3 mentality combined with a lot of the decentralized technologies that are getting built in the crypto world are going to unlock some new features and benefits for people that have connected vehicles or want to turn their dumb car into a smart car. So that's
okay.
That's what we're doing.
That's what you guys do. So if I were to explain this to my grandmother, who's dead, so she couldn't hear it, but just if I try to explain it to her, it's basically a device that you plug into your car, and it takes your car's data, whatever that data is, whether it's the, I don't know, fuel air mixture in the carburetor. Maybe you guys don't have that for older cars anymore, or any of that stuff, and it streams it somewhere to some platform, and that data is monetized. Is that kind of the beginnings of it?
Yeah, totally. And there's a bunch of, depending on what kind of vehicle you have and whether it has an existing internet connection, you're going to get dramatically different data from your car. But at the core, once you plug the device into the universal port on your vehicle, you're going to at least get location, accelerometer. In a lot of vehicles, like my electric vehicle, for example, you get cell level battery data that actually tells you about the health of your battery. A lot of this is information that the OEMs of the vehicle don't even have or aren't sending over the air. And the way we think about it is we're helping users collect this data about their own vehicle, and then we're providing more things for them to do with it. And one of the things you can do with it is monetize it. You can sell it back to your OEM. You can sell it to an insurance company. A lot of people are familiar with that process if they have a smart insurance dongle like a Metro Mile or a Progressive Snapshot. But what we're building is really meant to be kind of a general purpose IoT platform. So any kind of IoT data that you can collect and verify, you can use in an application. And the best apps are the ones that make their users some money. So that's what we're focusing on initially.
Oh, so it's not just cars. Is it any IoT thing that it must be at some portion, at least a radio, some kind of transmitter, because it's pushing information out.
Yeah.
Because I've seen
Starting with
about,
cars.
know,
We're starting with cars because the car is the most expensive IoT device that anybody has by a long shot, and
okay.
it's also what we know very well. I've spent
Yep.
10 years in the mobility space. My co-founder CTO Yev has connected millions of cars to the internet, and so he is intimately aware with the technical challenges of doing that, and a lot of the current state of the art behavior in the space. And so cars are kind of a beachhead. Just like for Helium, LoRaWAN was a beachhead into the telecom space. And we think there will be other device categories that get added to DIMO in relatively short order. And it will be things around the vehicle itself, whether it's, garage door opener, charging station.
Okay.
There's a lot of standardization happening in the smart home equipment space that makes that attractive to add to an IoT platform. But we've got about 10 years worth of stuff to build as it relates to cars. And cars are continuously getting smarter and more connected. So every year, there's more cars that have internet connections out of the box. And then also as cars start making more safety critical decisions on the road, like you see a lot of these crazy videos of Tesla owners, sleeping behind the wheel or, crashing while they're on autopilot. That data we think, needs to be collected and stored by the users of those vehicles. And right now that's just not the case. So there's a huge problem to solve there. There's a huge market for it. There's a lot of existing apps and services that we think would be a lot better if they were part of a user-owned network. So that's where we're starting.
Okay. And it doesn't go that far back in time. Like I bought one of these things or ordered one of these things, I don't know, a month ago. And I think it said on there basically like, hey, your car, your 2004 Toyota Tacoma is going to be like, we're not going to get much out of it. Does it go far back and can you get a bunch of information, or is it just like, hey, before 2008, you just don't get to see this stuff?
So we had to make a decision pretty early on. And this is something, that was part of the most centralized decision-making portion of the project. Like every day it gets a little bit more decentralized. So one of the decisions that we had to make when we were designing the network was we're going to support vehicles made in the last 10 years. Explicitly, it will work. The device will work with any vehicle that has a CAN bus that's providing power. And
the CAN bus is the connection, just for our non-tech people.
Yep. Yeah. It's typically under the steering column. It's a rhombus shaped port that has a bunch of pins on it. I should go grab one of the devices. It's over there. Maybe I'll text somebody to see if they can bring one in. But
they're pretty cool. They're like half the size of if you got skinny little forearms like me, half the size of your forearm with a wire off of it.
Yeah. So the current iteration of it is a little bit bigger than would be optimal, but you can make it fit and work in pretty much any consumer vehicle. So the idea is that we're going to explicitly support vehicles made in the last 10 years, but it will work in any car if you want to bring your car online. And the goal is sort of like with Helium, you go through this bootstrapping phase where the whole purpose is to build the supply side of the network. And that's going to attract people that, and mostly companies that want the data from those cars. And they're going to start paying. The way we think about it as a project as a whole is we build up this huge user-owned network, and then we take that bargaining power and we go to the companies that want the data and we negotiate on users' behalf and say, hey, if you want to get people cheaper insurance, if you want to help, a lot of used car networks are out there trying to buy people's vehicles right now, and it's a really inefficient market because there's not enough data about how the vehicle's been used in the past. And we think there's a lot of ways for people to get paid for that will surface as we build up supply.
Interesting. So I guess one of the use cases then is if you're that person that's like, oh yeah, I always take care of my car and I drive it really safely, then I can then report that to the used car resellers, to cars.com or whoever's selling it. And it's basically a proven thing that like, oh yeah, this person drove it really safely. They didn't drive like I drive.
Yep.
In my case, maybe I don't want this thing in there.
And the way we look at it is like, we're helping you collect your data. Like the data coming out of your car belongs to you as the owner of the car. And we're going to provide more ways for you to monetize that or use that for your benefit over time. And so initially up front, as there's fewer users on the network, same dynamics as Helium, where a greater share of the tokens will go to a lower percentage of the users. But over time, this would be kind of like, the way we think about it is, how do we make this something that you would be crazy not to put in your car? Because ultimately it's going to end up saving you so much money when you go to sell it, or it helps you. Here we go, got one now.
Look at that fancy thing. Cool.
Yeah. So,
and that can't just plug directly in. It's got to plug in with like a wire, so it's not hanging off the.
On a lot of
port,
vehicles,
right?
it can plug directly in. We do recommend using a cable, and so we have a bunch of our alpha fleet testers right now who are plugging them in, sending us photos. We're building up a database of like this car. Here's the best way to install it. Eventually, we're going to have in most of the major metro areas in the U.S., we're going to have people set up to be kind of like certified installers or physical locations you could bring your vehicle to and get one of these plugged in and drive away, and it will be all set up for you. So there's a lot of folks from the helium community in particular that have run hosting operations that understand the value of like professionally installing the equipment and making sure that it has the right antenna, and this is no different than that. It's making sure that someone has a good experience with the setup, which will put you in a good place down the line.
Now, is it as geeky as helium in the sense that you can fiddle with your antennas and your cables and connections, or is it pretty much like, no, you plug this thing in and there's not much optimizing you can do for it?
There's a big car hacker community, and there's a whole group of people that have been reverse engineering the signals that are passed over the CAN bus to provide more insight into what cars are thinking about. And those are folks that have been at it for years and years. There's a project called 𝗚𝗿𝐶𝐫, which has actually reversed a lot of cars to the point where they're building open source self-driving system for the cars. So they've actually reverse engineered the signals to the point where they can turn the steering wheel and push the gas and brake of the car. And there's about 10,000 people and I'm one of them with one of these systems running in their car. So my 2021 Toyota RAV4 has a roughly Tesla Autopilot equivalent self-driving system in it that's running on an Android phone. Yeah. So we're benefiting from a lot of the work that's happened in that community where people have already developed the tooling and the know-how to reverse engineer the signals coming from the car. And that gives you kind of like a verified way to increase the amount of data coming into the system over time. So there's definitely a super nerdy level that you can get to with this. And then one thing that we're focused on is creating the like dead simple consumer version where we show you only the information that you need. And it also like right out of the box helps you save money on your car, which is what we think 99% of the population cares about. And there will be, there's going to be another class of applications around like sharing data from your car and making that a little bit more social. And we think there's a lot of people that look at their car as sort of like a status symbol and something that they're collecting, and we want to reflect that in the digital copy of the vehicle that we're creating as well.
Okay, yeah, I certainly have the most badass truck ever built. So
we want to help you show that off. Your 2004 Toyota Tacoma, right? Yeah,
it is hand painted by a Pakistani truck artist. It's unmistakable. I have people call me on the highway and they're like, "Hey, I just saw you driving." I'm like, "Oh man."
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so how much? Let's see. I guess at the beginning, like when I get mine, whenever it comes in the next week, month, etc., is it kind of enough data to sell to offset gas money, or is it like batshit crazy helium stuff where you're making 6 mortgage payments a month, or like where do you think it's going to start?
Yeah, so it's tough to say.
Or are you guys stuck in the same thing that helium does?
It's tough to say. I'm sure that the folks at Helium probably had no idea where it was going to go when they launched it out, and ultimately like a lot of the value of the data is going to be determined by the market. So we're not here being very prescriptive about what the customer acquisition cost for an insurance company is, and a lot of it's going to be opt-in too, right? So like users will be able to like step one is collect your own data, and then we can within your vault, your data vault, like run some very simple like client side stuff that says, hey, like here's roughly what we think this is worth in terms of the token, and also what you could potentially save by sharing it with these partners, which we vetted and kind of have brought into the ecosystem. And we're coming up with a pretty we're trying to make it as simple as possible way for people to like credibly join the network as an application. and make use of the data that consumers have provided. And we think there's a lot of value that will get unlocked because of that. And it's around the transactions that people are already making with their vehicle. So insurance is a pretty inefficient market, and used cars are a pretty inefficient market, and just car ownership in general, we think is something that if consumers had more data and the folks in the kind of like ecosystem of automotive services had the ability to access that data and acquire new users more efficiently, then there would be a lot of savings to go around for everybody.
So how does that work for like a normal person? I'm driving around in my truck, and this stuff is gathering my data, and I say, hey, it's okay to share it with mechanics around me so they can tell me that, hey, like you should really take this thing in. Or is it some other way that you're seeing that happen?
Here's some data. So this is from a car that we have connected and software only. This is a vehicle, one of our team members here, not a user, and we're pulling very basic information about how much the vehicle is being driven. So here the guy went on a trip. You get the odometer. In this case, from a gas car, you get the oil level, and so it looks like they're due for an oil change soon. One of the most important transactions around your vehicle is making sure that your tires are properly inflated and that they have good tread left on them. And so
you guys, hang on a second. You guys are car geeks, right? Like I don't meet normal people who are like, oh yeah, you really got to know your tire pressure. Like, and you said like, I already hacked my own car so it drives itself. So maybe I should back up and dive into this. Is it's a group of dudes, and are you guys all way into your cars? Or is it just, are you kind of
I would describe myself as a mobility person. So I don't think that car ownership is the end all be all. I certainly get way more into my car as like a piece of electronics and a device in my life than your average person does. But I love riding my bike. I'm a big transit guy. We have a lot of our engineering team is based in Ann Arbor and the Detroit area. So obviously there's a lot of gearheads there, and that's a big part of the culture of our team. But ultimately, there's a couple things that we believe in, which is like car ownership in general is very expensive for the average person. It's kind of it's a necessity in the U.S. and most of the major cities, and people spend a lot of money on it because they have to. And we think it would be better if they didn't. And we also, pretty early on made a decision when we put out the first draft of our plan for how we were going to reward people. We got a bunch of memes back in our Discord, and everybody was like, I'm going to drive so much more because of this. Like, can't wait to like go on some, unnecessary road trip to earn more tokens. And we were like, wait a minute. Like, we probably don't want to incentivize people to drive around unnecessarily. So we had to go back to the drawing board and come up with a way to validate that vehicles were real, that they're on the network, and do so without incentivizing people to drive unnecessarily. And so there's, part of the story around the project is like helping people not just make the right decision for themselves financially, which in a lot of cases is drive less or, use your vehicle more efficiently, maybe. But we're certainly not here to just like unnecessarily incentivize car ownership or to, unnecessarily incentivize people to drive around when they don't have to.
Oh, it's interesting because not that I'd drive anymore anyway, but that would be one thing where you could say, hey, I'll just drive more and earn more tokens. Is it something that's going to be better for, say, an Uber driver in the same way that like a Hive Mapper? I don't know if you've heard of that project, but
yeah, totally. We love what they're doing, and we've always sort of envisioned that as a potential app or kind of like collaboration that could be on the platform. I'm a big map nerd myself, and we think that for professional drivers and fleet vehicles, there will be a very strong incentive to share data from your vehicle, and the marginal benefit of additional miles is not very high. And there's actually quite a lot of signal in sharing data from your vehicle that indicates that you don't drive a lot. So that's what these smart insurance...
because that goes to your insurance.
Right.
Yeah.
And also allows people to, it could allow us to, one day there will be apps on the platform that will, basically take in your mobility data and be able to make recommendations on things that you could change, or maybe, the next car that you might want to buy, you one of the things initially, like very early on in the project, we were thinking about just supporting electric vehicles because the battery data from those electric vehicles is quite valuable at this point. People really want to know how they're performing and which OEMs are making the best batteries and whether their vehicles are likely to be recalled. Like the Chevy Bolt had a massive recall about 6 months ago. And ultimately, we decided to support gas vehicles as well because we realized that everyone who doesn't have an electric vehicle is going to at least consider buying one for their next car. And there's a lot more used electric vehicles coming onto the market. And so having giving somebody the ability to collect their own driving data will help them more confidently make a decision about whether or not they should buy an electric vehicle in the future, because they can look at it and say, I never actually drive more than 200 miles anyways. So if I bought an EV that has a 200-mile range, like it would be no problem for me. And so, yeah, we want to, really help people just make more intelligent decisions with their own driving data to start, but eventually data from any IoT device they have in their life.
Okay. So let's say a couple things come up. There's one is that you said you want to track mobility data, and that you had made a distinction earlier in the conversation that you guys aren't just a car company, that you're into mobility. And so are you thinking of a device or set of devices that tracks data from when I'm driving and biking and running and walking and hiking? Is that kind of the direction you're going? Or is it more like, probably just like biking and driving?
Man, everybody's going to hate me if I say that we're going to like build the Web3 version of Strava, but that is something that I've definitely sort of dreamed about, and I think years down the line that will be incorporated into the platform. And we are releasing a mobile app I was just testing one of the early builds of it. We have about 100 people on it on test flight today, and so this gives us the ability to allow someone to opt in to store their own mobility data outside of the vehicle, and it gives us another layer through which to basically allow them to add their travel data over time. It's not something that's going to be a big part of it at the beginning, but it's certainly something that we've imagined layering in over time. Like I said, there's quite a lot to build.
That's just an app.
Yeah, it's an app, but your phone, and a lot of people, we have this conversation with folks where they're like, well, I don't know if I want somebody to track me in the car, our feedback to folks is, well, we're allowing you to track yourself. And if you're bringing a phone around with you, like most of the apps and services that you're using are already tracking your location wherever you go. And we certainly don't want to make that worse. We think that the next best thing is at least for you to have your own copy of all of that information and be able to use it for your own benefit versus just sending it off to somebody else who gets to decide whether you get it back or not.
Yeah. Okay. And then let's see. So that's interesting going across all the different ways of mobilizing. And then the second piece was, will I be able to move this thing from my car to my truck? So I've got a little electric Golf. Is this something where I'm like, I'm going to take the truck today, I'm going to plug it in over here and hit like option 1, or no, I'm going to go take the Golf today and the next day and hit option 2? Or is it just like, nope, one device, one car kind of thing?
It'll be like updating your Helium hotspot location at the beginning, which is something I guess your audience is familiar with. You have to pay to reassert your Helium hotspot location. It's going to be something that is, generally we are going to try to keep it so that people who plug this into their car are leaving it in that car. It won't be the most user-friendly thing in the world to switch from one car to another. We're also working on driving the cost of the device down to the point where you're just going to want to put one in all of your cars. And
right. Is it $200 or something? I forget what it was. It wasn't
right
so
now.
big
It's
that I was like, holy shit,
right now it's $340, which includes 2 years of cellular connectivity. And we use a Twilio Super SIM, so that it's something we're hoping to drive the cost down on over time, specifically the cell portion of it, and then also the hardware. I think we're going to have, especially as the services ecosystem develops around the platform and the data that people are sharing and collecting on their own. We think we're going to be able to drive the cost of the hardware down to the point where you can get one, as long as you're plugging it in and opting in to some level of data sharing. You're going to be able to get one for very little upfront cost,
for reasonably cheap. Okay, so you can just offset that over time.
There's a large number of users that are able to get started with DIMO without any hardware as well, which is something that I think we haven't done a great job of explaining to people. Is there's about 72 million cars in the US today that have an existing internet connection. And now whether or not the user has maintained that or opted into the OEM's internet subscription is one thing, but basically every Tesla on the road today can start using DIMO, and we're going to release a feature. I was just testing it out earlier this week that is specifically designed for Tesla owners. And it allows them, allows us to help Tesla owners pull a large amount of data from their vehicles down to individual trips and opt into the network without without any hardware.
And they can't already see that, or is that? Interesting.
So you can, if you have a Tesla app, it has some trip tracking functionality. You can see the status of your vehicle. What it doesn't allow you to do is share that outside if you want. And so they have kind of like their own
so
closed ecosystem of Tesla apps and services. And we want people to be able to, so if you have a Tesla and a Mustang Mach-E, you'd be able to go to one dashboard and see the information about both of them and opt into services around your mini fleet of vehicles, regardless of what kind of car you have.
Oh, cool. That's it. Are you clearly on the side of the Tesla or the Mustang?
So I've had both.
Where do you fall?
I have a Mach-E right now, and it's a great car. I have some beef with the mobile app, and it's they built the phone as a key into the car, and you can tell that there must have been some miscommunication around how the Bluetooth spec works, because it's the worst. It's the worst possible scenario where it's not like it doesn't work 100% of the time. It doesn't work 50% of the time. So like about half the time you walk up to it, the doors unlock, and the other half you're like just standing there like pushing the button waiting for it to happen. But it is a great car, and I had a Model 3 when I was living in California, and I am a big fan of what they've done with that vehicle, because we've seen how it has accelerated the automotive industry towards electrification. And you can have whatever opinion you want about Elon Musk and about Tesla, but they've made a pretty incredible product that a lot of folks in the automotive industry are trying to copy now. And it's on balance good for everybody. So
yeah, no, he changed the world. It's just like, well, how can you argue with that?
Yeah,
maybe you don't like him personally. Who cares? He changed the world for the better, I'd say. Are there limits to this, like what this thing can do, that you guys look at and you're like, man, if we could only get whatever, a longer battery life or farther range or more data, like what are the limits of this thing as you see them right now?
It's a good question. I mean, certainly the connectivity costs are a big limiting factor. And we had to, we went out and so we'd incubated this project through a consulting company that I was running with, a couple of folks, kind of like nights and weekends. We were doing a lot of helium mining and hacking hands-on with a bunch of projects. And we realized in order to get this thing off the ground to the point where you can even have one user on the platform, you're going to have to spend a couple $1 million in R&D and build out some stuff that, it's not like, it's not like spinning up a new DeFi protocol, you can't just write some contracts and there's real hardware innovation and stuff that went into it. And so driving down the cost of connectivity for the device is a big thing for us over the next couple of years. And in order to get to the point where that's even possible, you have to get up to a scale of 10,000 plus devices connected for a telecom to take you seriously. And one of the things we're banking on is that helium is going to drive down the cost of cellular connectivity and also allow us to verify. We think a lot about spoofing as well, and that's because of our experience with helium. We saw that firsthand how crafty some people are at figuring out how to send fake data into the network. And it's something that we're kind of embracing from the early stages. So more people trying to spoof, and also helping us figure out how to drive down connectivity costs is what we spend a lot of time thinking about. And then, if I could snap my fingers and make one thing happen right now, it would be for a lot of the apps and services that people are using today in the kind of Web 2 mobility world to exist on the DIMO platform. And that's something that we're going to spend a tremendous amount of time and effort seeding and building out. So, we look at the margins of any insurance company or used car dealer or someone who's like making a lot of money off of consumers in some inefficient market for automotive services, and we look at that as an opportunity to like get our users paid. So that's
get in there, yeah. Change a little bit of the flow of the money through a data stream. And what you guys are doing is not. It was interesting. I was just watching this video you just put out, and I think there'd just be DIMO, but there are. I'm going to read them: D media, D app ecosystem, D core, capital D, D administrative, D native, D growth, D store, D platform. Like there's a lot of Ds.
Yeah.
What's going on with that? Is it just how you kind of thinking about the sections of your company, or is that a much bigger play to do many more things? I mean, it sounds like you want to do the whole IoT thing and not just mobility.
Yeah. So I'll throw up a slide and I'll kind of show you like, here's how we're thinking about it, right? We're looking at what we're building as a city. And we kind of all started off in this one building here, and we're pulling in pieces from other projects. Like we're working extensively with 𝗚𝗏𝗶𝘀𝐴. We are building with the Helium network. We have a great partner, Smart Car. We've pulled in some code from a lot of great open source projects like Streamer and Benthos. And like we're trying to think of this as like we've developed everything within this one office building, and now we're like taking some of the different floors of that building and allowing people to start visiting them, like giving them visitor badges and saying, hey, you can come. And we had some community members show up and write some great content for us that allowed us to explain connected vehicle data. We are going to end up pulling some more money into the ecosystem from like a venture capital firm or from partners that want to incentivize people to build apps and businesses on the platform. We want to create products and services specifically for fleets, and like all of those things, rather than existing within one company, should be kind of like their own building. And if you want to interact with one of them, you should be able to show up in the lobby of that building and say, hey, like I need I need support for my fleet, or I want to create an NFT project on top of this car data, or I want to do big data analysis on some of the information that you have stored, and I'm willing to pay your users for that. And that's something that is going to continue to be part of the narrative around the project, is that we've started from this highly centralized place out of necessity because we had to get things off the ground, and over time we're thinking about all these different things that need to exist in the ecosystem and kind of setting them up. Like right now we're pouring the foundation for their buildings, and then in 6 months you'll have like a whole team of people moved in and like kind of doing their own thing in there, and that's how we're planning on scaling up the whole project. Very similar to what Helium has done with DY as a foundation. We're going to be forming a foundation that owns a lot of the IP and controls the token that gets issued to users and a lot of the sort of like open source aspects of the project. And then we expect, in addition to 𝗚𝗏𝗶𝘀𝐴 and some of the other companies that are there's some that are in stealth mode, sort of building on the platform, like there will be 3 or 4 other companies that have similar footing to Digital Infrastructure Inc., which is the company that incubated DIMO, and are building hardware products or software products that are meant to kind of like move the project as a whole into the next phase. So this will not be the last hardware product built on DIMO, and even the 𝗚𝗏𝗶𝘀𝐴 guys, which I think we need to do a better job of kind of like surfacing the work that they're doing. Like they have designs for a small version of this, like a much better fleet optimized version in the future, and there's going to be a pretty diverse ecosystem of hardware options for people that goes beyond even what you see in Helium. Like there's 15 different hardware providers in the Helium world, and I think all of those folks are genuinely making pretty much the same product. Like it has the same end result. There's a lot more room to run with DIMO in that we can add video support. There's some of these aftermarket like self-driving systems. There's other sensors that you can put in and around the car, other device categories that we can add over time. So like we know that that's a much bigger task than one company can take on its own.
Yeah. What are the other device categories? So good.
Dash cams are certainly a big one. And we think a lot about supporting video. And there's a version of this product that, so I was working in the autonomous vehicle industry for about 4 years before I started DIMO. And I always thought that a device very similar to a black box on an airplane needed to exist for autonomous vehicles. And you'd be surprised, but there's not too many people working on that today. So like a future version of a DIMO device would be something that can withstand a car crash, is rated to the point where it can ingest the data, not just from the CAN bus of the vehicle, but from other sensor systems and computers running on the car, and form like a definition of what's happening in the real world at that moment, and host it on its, on its own local storage, and also push it up to its own cloud. And like, that's something that, we think as cars make more safety critical decisions in the real world is going to need to exist. So you can think of this as like an early, first step that works for basically every car. Really great starting point. In the future, there's going to be iterations that are more ruggedized, have more redundancy. There's accessories around this that you can plug in, like you can put a screen on it, you can attach a helium mapper to it, you can attach an antenna to it. So there's a whole bunch of accessories that are going to start to come out, and 𝗚𝗏𝗏 has already released a bunch of those. You can go on their store today and buy them, and we're going to make those more available to people in the US as well.
Okay, so you can upgrade this thing a little bit. What one thing we've seen, you mentioned it earlier in helium, is that there was the incentives drove unwanted behavior. What do you think might happen? What's going to be the perversion of DIMO with people using this thing in ways that you neither intended nor wanted? Like, what do you expect some of those behaviors might be?
It's a good question. And I think we've got a really good group of people and early community members that are kind of like on the lookout and have this great North Star for like, we want to help people collect and store their own data and then decide what to do with it. And it's not, everybody has seen how if you create like a honeypot of location data or, private keys or whatever, like there's always going to be people that try to, trick you into giving that up and doxing yourself or giving away the keys to your wallet. So like making sure that we're being very responsible about onboarding people into like having a wallet. I think a lot of DIMO users this is going to be like the first time that they've ever owned any crypto, which is cool because like we get to bring a lot of people into the world that way. Sure. And we want to make sure we do that responsibly and, allow people to have a good experience with that. And then I think one of the things that we're going to really push the envelope on and we'll be sharing a lot more information on over the next couple of weeks is like, how do you make sure that an app developer who's getting access to someone's mobility data, whether it's really high level, like we're going to start super high level with like aggregated data at a fleet level, like nothing that could, give away people's PII, but like eventually in order to use some of the apps, like you will need to give up some privacy. I think people are generally comfortable with that, especially if they're compensated for it, right? But like, how do you make sure that the app developers...
And they do it for free right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody... Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so how do you make sure that an app developer is aligned with a user long-term? And we think there's a way to use the token to ensure that at the very least, there's some financial alignment between a developer on the platform and the user who, by providing data in and being a part of the network and keeping their vehicle connected, is earning ownership of the network just like Helium is. And that's something that we've thought quite a bit about. But we think if there's any, there's bound to eventually be something negative that happens around people sharing data on the platform. And we just want to minimize that as much as possible because we think the benefits so dramatically outweigh like the potential issues. And the flip side of it is like, look, where we're headed as a society right now, which is not something that people know a lot, is like you buy a new vehicle, and I won't call out any specific OEM, but you can look all this up. And like, if you buy a new vehicle from one of the top 5 OEMs in the US, typically you're opting into a connected vehicle service that allows them to do whatever they want with your data. So that can involve selling it to a third party. A lot of these vehicles own video or have video cameras on them. And like, we want to be able to provide people with a way to opt out of that world. Like we think it's, surveillance capitalism at its worst is like, you buy a car and in order to get the app where you can unlock your doors or like turn on remote start, you have to sell your data to a third party who's then selling it to another third party and they get hacked and your data gets exposed, or they're selling it to your insurance company who's reducing your rates, or law enforcement gets
you're,
access
you're
to
not
it.
selling it. You're giving it away.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So it's getting taken from you. So, I mean, can you put like 10 of these? I mean, these are the questions that I get asked all the time about helium. Can you put 10 of these things in one car and just like, oh yeah, I'll drive this car around and 10x my earnings? Or
Yeah. So cars are nice because they do have unique identities to begin with. So we're able to leverage a lot of the trust structures that already exist around cars that enforce uniqueness.
Yep.
So like no two cars have the same VIN number. There's a lot of ways to validate that like a person actually owns their vehicle. And our approach on this is in order to do the bare minimum of, so you can't add the same VIN number to two different accounts in DIMO. And so we enforce uniqueness that way at like a very basic level. And so there is a spoofing attack vector where you buy 100 of these and you plug them in and you drive them around in this, some truck, and you're, theoretically could try to get paid that way. There's quite a bit of ways to mitigate that. And we're looking at this ultimately as something that is going to come out. We have, basically all these attack vectors lined up for testing in the next few months leading up to the launch of the token. And we think there's likely to be some spoofing, but ultimately it's going to be so dramatically outweighed. Like you can increase the cost of it to the point where like it's an interesting thing to do, but like it's going to be really hard to do that at a scale of like thousands or even hundreds of devices. So,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be some jackass, though, that has the time and the expertise to go into the DMV records and figure out like what cars were wrecked but haven't been reported. And they get 6,000 VINs and they buy a bunch of your devices and drive them all around in the truck. But it sounds like that's doable, but probably not the route for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And
is there a motorcycle version of this thing, or is it just cars?
Man, I don't know. I think there are motorcycles that have cam, but I'm not the guy to ask that question to. I'm sure that you can make this work. Nobody else has asked me
even
that
more
yet.
Inefficiencies in, motorcycles are flat out dangerous.
Right.
Those things are deadly. I fly a paraglider. I would never ride a motorcycle.
Yeah.
I'd expect that the insurance kind of benefit of having one of your devices on a motorcycle would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
You'd see what people get up to.
I'm sure we'll have someone figure out how to make that work. And look, like we're open to supporting. There is a world in which you can add, and I think this will happen, pretty quickly. It's not something that we have enough stuff planned to build around cars to keep us busy for multiple years. But I think soon enough, we'll have the platform open to the point where if somebody's like, I want to import my Strava data, or I want to attach one of these things to my hang glider, like, yeah, I mean, that would be great, especially with a lot of the building blocks that we're going to create around proof of movement. And there will be a lot of cool stuff that I think ends up crossing over between like the helium mapping community and the DIMO community.
Interesting. So just as a thought experiment, and because I'm a selfish asshole, in paragliding, we'll launch off a mountain and we go out and we're looking for a thermal to circle in to go up. And there are kind of pretty rough maps right now of where people typically find lift. You can look at these kind of heat maps around the world where it's like, oh, there's usually a thermal there, and here's what time of day. Is what I'm hearing from this is because this is kind of mobility at its core, it's mobility focused, is I could repurpose that kind of thing for kind of like creating maps of where the paragliding or the lift is the greatest. Huh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
That is the first time somebody has brought that up as a use case, but certainly like, other things that people have thrown out are like, we've had several race teams reach out to us, and they want to have the like performance data recorder video from their fast laps on the racetrack saved in their DIMO account, and we're working on a project to allow people to mint those as NFTs and send them to people. And like you have a lot of people go and do these like cannonball runs across the country or road trips around the Swiss Alps, and being able to like commemorate that with a piece of verified data that's attached to the vehicle that you were in and share that is something that I think is going to people
that's cool.
smarter
Yeah.
and more creative than me are going to build cool apps that allow you to share that type of information.
Okay, so it goes everywhere. It goes motorcycles, scooters. It goes to little birds that you just see everywhere.
Yeah,
is that you're tracking all this movement data. Interesting. Are you going to do the same thing with animals as well? I was just listening to a podcast with someone tracking birds and elephants and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
a great.
Mobility getting.
I bought and I for whatever reason it never shipped, but I bought one of those helium or LoRaWAN dog trackers, and I was going to put it on my dog. But I could see a future iteration of this product having any kind of like location data based device in your inventory. One thing that I kind of think about a lot as it relates to IoT devices in general is the concept of an inventory in a video game where you have 50 items that you can use at any point in time. And it's gotten to that point with me in particular with my IoT device addiction, where I go into my office and I have 75 internet connected devices in various states of disarray, and just allowing people to kind of like organize that and keep track of it and use the information from those devices for productive purposes is part of the long-term vision of what we're doing. And cars are just the starting point because they're the most expensive and we think the most inefficiently used. But yeah, certainly with cheaper connectivity through helium and cheaper devices and more devices connected, it's going to become a bigger and bigger problem and opportunity for people.
Yeah. Problem and opportunity, the same thing. What about the big trucking companies? Are you guys also looking at that and talking to those folks and saying, look, this is, you guys are logging millions of miles a year across your fleet. You should plug this thing to all of your trucks.
Fleets are really interesting. We have had a lot of fleets show up. We have a lot of experience on our team from the fleet management world, and we think about that as one of the core use cases from a commercial perspective for what we're building.
Sure.
And we also know that has, especially for fleets that have existing telematics solutions and are using it, have driver monitoring requirements and high safety and uptime requirements, that we will get there. And it's something that we're going to support in the early days for smaller fleets, medium-sized fleets. And, there's going to be some really exciting stuff that comes out there, and it will take a little bit longer than the consumer stuff because we wanted to make sure early on that the consumers who are really interested and passionate about the project were able to participate. So we limited the size of the pre-sale to 2 units, and we're going to do a specific sale just for fleets. But we want to qualify them and make sure that they're actually going to use the product in the first place.
Yep.
And also, we think a lot of the consumers that have purchased one of the devices and a lot of folks that we've set up with alpha accounts are going to be fleet operators themselves and are interested in trying it out in a larger fleet. So we're looking at that as certainly an application for what we're building and a very different user where they might not, the only thing they care about is saving money. They're, much more rational, economically interested actor. And so fleets will be a big part of DIMO for sure. DIMO Pro is what we're calling it.
DIMO D Pro, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you just put a D in front of it. It's done. And then what else, I guess, to kind of wrap up is, what are the other, I guess, Web3 aspects of this? So there's the obvious, you're monetizing your data stream. There was the less obvious but pretty cool idea of an NFT for a specific trip on a vehicle. What else, I guess, one thing is, what else do you see? And then what else do you see? I'll stop with that one.
So there was a big discussion early on about how Web3 DIMO needed to be at the beginning. And we looked quite a bit into decentralized data storage, Filecoin, Arweave, all of those, and determined for a variety of reasons. This is something our CTO can go into far more detail than I can, but That
Sure.
is
Let's keep it big.
that's
big
a
picture.
roadmap item for us for sure.
Yep. Okay.
And the MVP of DIMO that is going to get into consumer hands that we're building towards is device identity. So mint your vehicle as an NFT and pay the device for proof of movement trips in the real world. So you did something in the real world, we were able to verify that. Initially, the verification and the sort of validator layer is going to be something that's highly centralized at the beginning, much more so than a lot of people would probably want. But it's the reality of the situation for us trying to get this out and test the issuance part of it and the device identity part of it. And the marketplace and the services and apps layer is going to be as decentralized as we can make it at the beginning. But for a variety of reasons, because we're going to be giving access and essentially negotiating on behalf of our users with companies in the insurance space or the automotive realm, like a lot of that is going to be fairly centralized at the beginning. And we have a pretty clear roadmap to progressively decentralize that over time to the point where it's managed by the community. So we end up creating like kind of the biggest user-owned car club in the world is one way to think about the long-term progression of DIMO. And so there's the technical decentralization, and then there's the logical and like governance decentralization of the project. And we have a really good roadmap in place for how that's going to work on both fronts. And I think it's something that's going to change quite a bit over time, but I feel really good about the people that we have thinking about that. And I am one of, at this point, 30 people that are waking up every day, just like thinking about how to make this better. And one of the key vectors that we're pushing towards is like how decentralized can we make it, and how much control can we put in the hands of users. And so, yeah.
Huh. I mean, do you think someone that will see stuff as we've seen in Helium, where someone buys 200 of these things and hands them out to their neighborhood, and it's just like, yeah, I'll give you, like, I'll white label whatever you guys are doing and give you the data, but I'll take most of the DT or whatever the coins that you guys are going to create?
We have, so the first dip that was created, which of course is modeled after the BIP and the HIP. The first community generated improvement proposal was around changing the account structure to enable the hosting model that is very popular in Helium. And I think there's a pretty robust debate about whether that's needed or not. And I don't have a strong opinion in either direction, but I do appreciate the value of onboarding people who are not comfortable or don't understand the crypto token, and doing so in a way where they don't have to expose their driving data to the owner of the unit is kind of unique to DIMO, right? If you're a Helium host and you send somebody a hotspot, you know roughly where they live already, but the hotspot doesn't move and it doesn't go where they go. And so there is a change to how we were initially planning to do accounts. It's not a very big change because it's very similar to how fleets work, and also just the automotive finance world in general, where like you buy a car and you finance it through General Motors, and they know where you are. If they need to repossess your car, they can come and get it. But a lot of people might have auto loans where that's not the case, and we think making sure that users are very clear about who has access to their data and when is priority number one for us. And so if there is a hosting model where people are getting devices for low to no
free
upfront cost, then there is some assurance that the owner of that device needs to have that it's being plugged in. They need to be able to see the earnings from it. But should they have access to the person's location at all times? No. So we're going to be fairly opinionated about that as it relates to protecting user privacy, but we see real value. I personally see real value in enabling that, and I think there's a whole community of people in the Helium world that are very excited about getting the devices out there in large numbers, which is awesome. So as long as it's done responsibly, we're cool with it.
Look at Emirate. I'd be surprised if they haven't knocked on your door already and said like, "Hey, can we buy 500,000 of these things? We got places to put them."
Yeah, and look, that was part of
the game.
Not them specifically, but certainly those conversations early on, when we shared a little bit about what we're doing, was part of what led us to limit the pre-sale and to at least verify that the folks we're selling these devices to initially intend to use them in the right way. And there's, I think, a lot of benefit to the hosting model. And I think one in particular that I'll throw out there in case anybody is like, a car detailer or owns a car shop or has an automotive appliance, like, car stereo business. Like, this is a product that if you're, willing to add it to your lineup of services that you offer and professionally install it for users, like, we're actively talking to folks that are going to get hundreds of these devices and ultimately install them on behalf of users and, sort of onboard people to the network and set them up with their accounts and apps. And that's something that is definitely going to be a part of what we're doing. And our intent is not to make money on the device itself, but in building out the network. And, that's kind of the long-term goal for us. So there's a distributor model. It looks probably a little bit different than hosting in Helium, but ultimately, it's kind of the same theory behind it for sure.
Dig it, dude! I think it's a super cool project. I'm excited for people to see this and put an order in.
I got to get back to getting you your unit shipped out. So
yeah, right. You got to get back to the shipping room. How soon are units shipping, or how fast after people order are they getting them?
We are braving the global supply chain right now on behalf of our users. And we have 100 units that have gone out to alpha testers who are helping us with install. We've sold many more than that, and we'll have another 400 coming into the country within the next couple of weeks. And we are going through some final validation steps on the initial batch, making sure that we have them all updated. And then there's going to be a much larger wave coming through. We've published a whole schedule. You can get it on docs.dimo.zone. And it's not the most clear at this point because there's a lot of fleet orders that are still coming in. But essentially the goal is to get them shipped out in the order that they were ordered initially. And there's the initial wave of folks that have placed orders up to this point are going to have their device by July, August at the latest this year. And we're going to scale up responsibly from there. So
cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. I'll keep an eye out for a package.
All right, man.
Don't rush mine through for sure. But it's exciting just to see all this stuff where we just get to monetize the stream of data that we're all throwing off, and in many cases is being monetized by someone else, and we get to take a little bit of that power into our own hands. So super cool for you guys for doing that.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Well, we're excited to get it into your hands, and I appreciate you taking the time today.
Heck yeah.
Bye, Nick.